everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ratliff Mandolins production diary. And I will tell you that it is already Wednesday, and I haven't really, this is the first video I've shot this week. I've been busy with this particular mandolin instead of the regular production batch, and I will tell you why and what the story is about this particular mandolin. Normally, I work on batches of 10, as a lot of you know, but this customer brought this mandolin in almost 2 weeks ago, and I promised to try to get it done in a couple of weeks. And so that's why I just decided to kind of concentrate my effort on this thing, at least this week, to get as far as I possibly could on it. Now let me describe this and tell you what it is. It's a mandolin that I built in 1989. So it is almost 25, 30 years, 35 years old. And the customer that brought it to me recently purchased it and had a couple of things they wanted to have done to it. And they wanted me to just check it out, make sure it was healthy and all the glue seams were good and all like that, which they were. And so the other things that they wanted to do were they wanted to have a radius fretboard. Back then I just put flat fretboards on, so they wanted a radius fretboard. So this week so far I have pulled all the old frets, leveled the fretboard, radiused it, and replaced the frets. So we have basically a new fret job here, and I haven't cleaned off the edges, the sharp edges yet, but that's the only thing left to do on this fret job here. That's been done. They also wanted me to scrape the finish off of the neck and make it a speed neck. So I've spent some time this week cleaning all that up, getting all the finish off, getting it sanded back smooth, slicked up and everything, so that if we have a speed neck, which is basically raw wood here. And then the purpose behind a speed neck, for those of you that don't know, is that in the summertime, when you're hot and sweaty and you're playing, your hands don't stick on that lacquery finish. You just have raw wood to go on. And so theoretically it's a better summertime thing. And the last thing that they wanted to do, which I haven't started yet, but we're going to film me doing that for this episode, is to put a pick guard on it, an abbreviated, one of those short, narrower pick guards. And so to do that, I can usually when I put a pick guard on, I can either put on a cheap store-bought one or I make one. And they asked me to make one. And so I thought we'll go through the process of making one. To do that, I'll show you the contents of my little pick guard box. So come closer and I'll show you what's inside here. I have 2 boxes of stuff that for no real reason, I keep them separate just because this thing isn't big enough to hold them all. But this is the attachment hardware that I keep. These little brackets. I have some stuff to make gold ones with. Quite often I have some nice aluminum here, and quite often I just cut an aluminum angle or bend a piece and drill holes in it and just have a solid unadjustable attachment for this bracket stuff that needs to go on the side of the pick guard. And sometimes we might not even use that for this pick guard, because sometimes those narrow ones you just don't put anything on, but we'll see. In here I have what I make pick guards out of, and there's usually wooden pick guards, either some ebony or that's my Mandocello's pick guard from 1919. It's tortoiseshell and coming apart, and I really don't know how to fix it, and I've kind of stabilized it with the wooden overlay right there, but for the moment it's in limbo. Now I quite often, if I have a piece of scrap wood that's really nice, this is a quilted maple, I will just lay that scrap board off and maybe even saw it out like that right there. I have some really cool black walnut, and it's hard telling what all I've got down in here. Sometimes I've had curly cherry and curly maple, and like I said, if it's just a really nice, cool looking board, I'll lay it off. And I do have some plastic stuff down in here as well. So what the customer liked was a piece of this quilted maple here, and I usually start off by laminating a piece of other wood crossways here, so that, because this stuff has a tendency to warp, and I'll kind of lay that and make a sandwich partial plywood, much like I did with this pick guard right here, just to stabilize it. It'll stabilize that, and I did that earlier this week. So let's go into the big room and take that out of the prop bar deck, and I can show you what we're going to do basically. So we're here at the prop bar deck, and basically what I have done is taken a piece of that quilted maple that we looked at earlier, the grain running this way, and then I've taken a piece of reasonably straight plain maple and glued it onto the back of the quilted maple with the grain running this way, so that we have almost that plywood effect of one warp counteracting the other warp, and hopefully that'll give us a pretty stable pick guard. So let's take this out of the prop bar deck, and I can show you a little bit about what we're talking about. Okay, remember that I said that we're going to make a short pick guard out of it, and we have basically traced a short pick guard on this piece of quilted maple, and as you can see, we've done a test for a possible color to stain this pick guard after it's been made, and the customer picked this particular piece of wood, and then you can see the growth rings going this way on this patch piece on the back. Now the next step will be to more or less get a rough shape that we can work with that will look more like a single pick guard, and we're going to go straight to the bandsaw and just kind of rough shape out basically what we want to have as a final shape. Now I'm going to like I said, this is a basic final shape, so I'm just going to take a magic marker so that I don't have any trouble seeing it, and make it as big as possible and leave as much excess as I feel like I can to have to work down into the final shape. I don't want to cut off anything more than what I have to right at the moment. So here we go with this. So now looking at what we've got up to this point, we have a very, very roughly shaped pick guard. The grain on this very cool looking piece of quilted maple is going, growth grain is growing this way. And on this back piece, we have this stabilizing grain going this way. That effect right there. And it's way too thick and it's misshapen, but I would like to just wipe a wet rag across that quilt right there to bring that grain pattern out. And isn't that just the coolest thing you've ever seen? I don't have a standard pickguard shape. I always just make them to fit each individual mandolin. So we're just going to lay this down here, and I have a pretty good idea of what the customer wants. And so we're just going to more or less pencil some of this excess away. Get rid of that on the bandsaw. Now I've took a little bit off here, and then we're going to just continue on taking little bits and pieces off until I'm more or less happy with the shape. I'm going to put a little bit more right there and a little bit more right here, I think. And there I have a profile that I am reasonably happy with, at least for the moment, and I can move on to the next step, which is addressing the thickness of this thing. It's got those two pieces of glued together wood, and this back piece, as well as the front piece, was just simply sanded off or sawed off on the bandsaw. The thickness was, so they're wavy and they're rough, and I mated the two gluing surfaces, but only that. So I'm going to take the outside, the part that you're going to be seeing, which is really, really pretty, and I'm going to level it off and thickness it down just a little bit on the belt sander. And then to make sure that everything is level and equal thickness all the way around it, I am going to lay this thing on a test board and pencil the shape, take a router, and then lay a little channel here, cut out a little channel for this thing to fit down into, so that I can push this through the drum sander and make sure that everything is perfectly level and the thicknesses are exactly the same all over. And then we will see how far we need to take it down from there. But first, I'm going to clean this surface up and thickness the visible piece of maple down to what I think it probably should be on the belt sander. Now this side is flat and of reasonable thickness, I think. So we're just going to lay this right here. And pencil that shape on there. And go get a router. All right, so there we have it. It's cut out. That's not necessarily all that pretty, but it doesn't really need to be, as long as this thing will fit and is tight enough in there to not rock around, and it's held really good. Now I have a handle that I can use to push it through the thickness sander. So let's go do that. Now I can just basically push that through, tighten this up just a little bit, and I'll make my first pass. Come to the other side of the machine, collect it, run it back, reset the depth just a little bit, and run it again until I keep just taking off more and more and more until I get to where I want to be. And so here it is. Oh yeah, nice, all equal thickness. Believe it or not, it's got a little bit of warp in it, but plastic warps too, and I really don't know what to do about that. So we are looking good right now. Time to go back in and kind of do the work on this section right here to fit it to the mandolin. Now you can see, I hope anyway, that this fretboard actually overhangs this underlying fretboard extender. So there's a little bit of a lip as you come from one plane surface to the other, and this has to kind of fit underneath that. So we need to do some work here to make all this area fit, slide under there like it's supposed to, and get around this 15th fret corner protector. Usually that has to be rounded over to match that curve. So it's going to just be some rasps and some shaping to do next. And the rasps I was talking about are these little needle rasps, not a big rasp. I now have basically the final fit up under the fretboard, the joint where the pick guard will be attached to the mandolin, and I've got that taken care of, and I have more or less the final profile that I'm happy with, and I'm pretty sure the bridge will fit back on there without being in the way, and all is good. This is the part where normally I would bind this pick guard to cover up that seam right there, but this customer has requested that we're not going to bind this pick guard. So I think what I will do will be to just sort of cut a 45-degree bevel right here up to that seam, kind of round everything over, so from the very edge of the pick guard will only look like it's about half as thick as it actually is. But then once we get inside here, then we still have the strength and everything. So I think that's what I'm going to try. I've never done one. I've always bound them. I've never had an unbound one, so this will be an experiment as well. So that's what I'm going to do next. I think I'll go ahead and fit and drive the pins here so that we can actually attach the thing and then bevel the edges, and we'll be getting pretty close to done with it actually. I have the holes drilled in this thing, and I have 3 short temporary pins and some lining marks on the pick guard and on the fretboard, and we're just going to set everything right here and press those tiny pins in and make a little hole. Ooh, look, they stuck very good. So now we know exactly where to drill 3 holes underneath that fretboard. So let me drill those holes. And to drill those holes, I actually have just a dowel rod with a couple of different size bits stuck in this dowel rod in the end. And this is the proper size for the brad nails that I'm going to use as pins to pin this pickguard in. So we're just going to reach right in there on those holes and drill them by hand. And now those holes are drilled, and matching holes are also drilled in the pickguard. So all we have to do is just pin everything together. Okay, I have the pins in it now. Come take a look. 3 pins, if you can see them. 3 holes. Everything works really well. A little bit of epoxy in there when we finally mount it, and it'll be good. Now we have to worry about making it pretty. And making it pretty consists of taking care of that bevel that I told you about before to get rid of that glue together seam, and then cleaning it up, sanding it down slick as we can get it, and putting some sort of finish. And for this one, we're going to stain it brown, and then some sort of protective coating over top of that. With pick guards, I do not like to use lacquer or anything that actually builds up on the surface and can get scratched. I would rather keep it with some sort of finish that the customer can easily fix. So either a clear Minwax or an oil finish, even if it's nothing more than lemon oil, Danish oil or something like that. And then I will usually just hit it with steel wool. The finest steel wool, what is it, 4X or something like that, because usually once the thing's in use, it gets fingernail scratches and of course pick scratches and dirt and everything else on it. If you just have some oil and fine steel wool, well, anybody can do that. A coat of oil on it today and then come back tomorrow and hit it with fine steel wool, and bingo, you've got a brand new pick guard at that point. So that's why I kind of steer clear of any kind of lacquer or any coat on a pick guard that builds up. So let me do that. I'll start with the bevel, and then we'll start going down through the grits, and then we'll put some stain on it and some kind of oil. Oh, and let me mention before I go too much farther, I did not use any kind of wire nails or paneling nails for these pins. I used some hardened steel 16th inch rod, so that this thing can just be you don't have to worry about bending these pins. I used a hardened rod. I have used paneling nails in the past, and they seem to work, but I don't think this one's going to have a bracket here to stabilize it. So I thought, well, we better use something that's really, really durable. So we use some hardened steel pins. Okay, here's what I'm going to try at first. I have a speed square just clamped to the table so I can kind of see this 45-degree angle here. And then I have the pick guard itself clamped upside down on the edge of this table. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball that angle and use a mini rasp and rasp until I hit that line down there, and then try to sand everything, or probably just before I hit that line, then try to sand everything clean. I'm going to try to pay attention to the angle over here and just kind of eyeball it after that. We'll see how it turns out. I had a friend stop by while I was sanding this pick guard and cleaning it up. A fellow I was in a band in for many years, 35 or 40 years ago, and we've known each other forever and a day, and we just chattered and talked and visited, and I was working on this pick guard, and without taking any video, I wound up finishing the sanding job and putting a stain on it. And so I was going to take video of that, but by golly, I just talked my way right through it. But I do have a nice chocolate stain on this quilted pick guard, and it's gorgeous. And I put a little coat of lemon oil on top of that. And let me bring the camera closer and just kind of test fit the final product here, and you can see what we've got. Now, most of that oil that I put on there is soaked into the wood, so it's kind of dull right now. And I'm going to, I think, let it soak overnight, and then try to wax it with some butcher's block wax tomorrow, and see if that won't kind of give it a satiny luster. And but basically the pick guard is done, and we'll just slip it into place right here. Won't glue anything in or anything like that, but that's pretty much going to be the final product. So by the time I wax this pick guard out tomorrow, the fretboard is done, the speed neck is done. We'll be able to put the strings back on, and this thing will be over, and I'll call the customer and let them know to come and pick it up. But that's how we put a pick guard on. Like I said before, sometimes I'll put especially a full pick guard that'll come down right like this. We'll put a bracket on it, and but that's basically the whole process behind building a pick guard. And I'm finally done with this repair, with the exception of gluing this pick guard on as the last thing to do. So again, we'll recap. I did a speed neck here, and I did a fret job. Well, basically I replaned the fretboard and put a radius in it and replaced the fret. So basically it was a fret job. Reset the bridge, done some work on the nut, and built the pick guard, which I'm going to put on in a minute. And this mandolin from 1983 or whenever it was, 1989, is back in good playing condition, I guess. So that's it. I'm going to glue this pick guard. Well, I'm just going to glue the pins, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do here. I've got some fish glue. I'm just going to coat these pins with fish glue and put everything together. It's really tight with no glue whatsoever, and I think that the fish glue will just hold it and maybe keep it in there in the future. And if it ever needs to come out, then it should be fairly easy to just kind of heat things up a little bit and get it out. So that's what we're going to do. I'll get some footage of that and we'll be done. Okay, well, let me say before we get started here that I didn't put a bracket on it like I mentioned before, but I did put a couple of little felt pads. You can buy these things at any of the dollar stores for a little bit of nothing, and they will keep your stuff apart and from rattling. Just little felt furniture type pads, or pads for plates or vases or whatever. I have a piece of scrap glass, and I have bench Q fish glue, and we're just going to take a Q-tip, a cotton swab, and just get a little bit around each of these pins. I just want just enough so that when it dries, it's going to stick the pins in. Without being something like crazy glue or super glue that's going to be quite so permanent. So there's our final installation. Like I said, that thing is really tight to begin with, and that fish glue should just keep it from wandering around in the future, and yet be fairly easy to take apart when we need to. And I, as far as I know, am done with this entire repair. I'm going to take some pictures of it for the cover photo for this video, and then I'm going to call the customer and tell them to come and get it. Well, the customer stopped by today, which is Friday, and picked that mandolin up, and all was well, and everybody's happy. And so I think I'm going to close this video off and say that that mandolin was not all that I got done this week. I also got some work done on the batch, just some in general sanding on the sides of all those mandolins and that sort of thing. And I got the first couple of pieces of binding, the inner black, white, black, wrapped on the back of this R5 master model. So that'll probably be the thrust of next week's efforts, or the main goal for the next week's work will be to try to get all the back binding on this thing. And so we'll see how that goes. It's Friday evening, just about quitting time, but before I quit, I have a 4-bulb fixture right here, right where I'm working, and we'll be working next week, and 3 of the bulbs are burned out. So I think I'm going to grab the step ladder and see if I can't get this light fixture working before I quit for the day. I'm going to do that. Thank you so very much for stopping in and spending your time with me, and we'll do this again next week. So we hope to see you then. Thanks a bunch. Come back, and bye for now.